Well, I've chosen. Oops. Everybody awake now? Good morning. I've chosen the theme for the month, God in Any Language, because, as I've said before, we've got 4 major holy days that are being celebrated in October. So the first week we looked at Yahweh, the God of Israel, because of the Jewish holy days from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur. And last week we celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day, honoring our Native American brothers and sisters, and the name of God, then, Wankan Tonka, even though there's over 600 tribes and not all of them use that name for God. And next week we're going to cover the Baha'i faith as it celebrates the birthday of its founder, Baha'u'llah. So today our topic is Brahman, the Hindu name for God. And I've chosen it because this Friday begins the 5-day festival of light called Diwali. As I said last week, when we peel back the dogma and doctrine of any religion to its mystical roots, we find a singular thread that runs through the tapestry of these seemingly diverse belief systems. And our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, knew this and understood it. He states, the science of mind is not a special revelation of any individual. It is rather the culmination of all revelations. We take the good wherever we find it, making it our own insofar as we understand it. So that's one of the things that I really do love about our teaching. It seeks to know the revelations of all religions, and we are all enriched by what we find. In fact, the order of service of many centers of spiritual living begin their order of service with the lighting of candles indicating all the world religions. So it's honoring all paths to God. I love it when we do that. So saying everything comes down to that basic belief that there is one. Excuse me. So today we're touching on the God of the Hindu faith, the one supreme energy, Brahman, and we're entering that portal through the celebration of Diwali. Diwali marks the end of the harvest season in most of India. And like our Thanksgiving tradition, the farmers give thanks for the bounty of the year gone by and pray for a good harvest for the year to come. And traditionally, this time also marks the closing of accounts for businesses dependent on the agrarian cycle. It's India's biggest and most important holiday of the year, as important to them as Christmas is to Christians. Because it's a time not only of Thanksgiving of the year gone by, but also a time when there is a prayer for abundance in the year to come, this celebration beckons Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and good fortune, to enter one's home with her blessing. So Diwali means row of lamps, which the Hindus light outside their homes. So there is a celebration in the streets, there is dancing, there is fireworks, and that's to catch Lakshmi's attention so that her curiosity will lead her into your neighborhood. And then each home has been thoroughly cleaned, and the small lamps that adorn the entrance are an invitation to Lakshmi to visit the family inside. So it's all beckoning Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, to come for another year. Mythologist Joseph Campbell said that one person's myth is another person's religion. And when we look at the Hindu philosophy, there are a myriad of gods and goddesses at work. And so we may be quick to dismiss the Hindu religion as, oh, that's just myth. That's just myth. Yet if we look more closely, we're going to find that all of the gods and goddesses, or behind all the gods and goddesses, there is a belief in Brahman, which is the unchanging reality behind all form, the universal consciousness from which the world is birthed. And John did a beautiful job this morning describing Brahman. which is very much, as he said, like our own belief that God is consciousness, God is divine intelligence. And we could say that one definition of God is the reality behind all form, just as the Hindus believe. And the aspect of Brahman is Atman, which is Brahman in expression. So according to the Hindu faith, all that is created is a form of this unchanging reality or universal consciousness. Dr. Holmes says, each of us is an individualized portion of creative life. The life we express on this plane is but a projection of the invisible. The process never shows its face, but we know that behind this life is that which is eternal, that which alone exists. We live because God lives in us. So the basic fundamental beliefs of both our philosophy and that of the Hindu tradition are identical. But then come all those pesky gods and goddesses. So let's take a moment to look at them. You know, you and I say, in the Science of Mind, we say that the attributes of God are love, truth, beauty, joy, harmony, peace, abundance, perfection. Well, the Hindus believe that as well, but symbolize these facets of the one through their gods and goddesses. And then to confuse us even more, these same gods and goddesses have a bunch of names. So, but if we look back and just realize that each god or goddess represents an aspect of Brahman in the world. And these gods and goddesses are generally paired. The two main gods, Vishnu and Shiva, are both paired with a goddess, so that represents both the masculine and feminine aspect of all creation. Lakshmi is Vishnu's female counterpart, his consort, and is the aspect of Brahman or God that is not only material wealth, but well-being in body, mind, and spirit. Vishnu is considered the preserver of the universe, filled with generosity and compassion. So his consort, Lakshmi, is a giver of those divine gifts that are abundant in nature. She is the compassionate and gracious bestower of gifts and pictured as the epitome of feminine beauty and grace. Shiva, as Krishna mentioned, is the destroyer of universes. But since universes must be destroyed before they can be recreated, Shiva is also called the recreator. And his female counterpart is Shakti, who is often called the energy of the universe, and which can appear to be both beneficial and detrimental. The Hindus believe that this is not the first universe. They say that Vishnu sleeps upon the waters of the infinite, and when his eyes open, a new universe appears, and when they close, the universe goes back into the undifferentiated consciousness from which it came. And there are billions of years between his eyes opening and closing. It is said that Shiva dances the world into form. He represents infinite creativity, and that's why he's called the destroyer. Because if we think of his actions from a material physical standpoint, we would not have the beauty of this world as we know it without the earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions that gave birth to what we have now. And if we think of his actions from a spiritual standpoint, we know that we, on our spiritual journey, cannot move forward if we are hanging on to old ideas that don't serve us. So we have to let go, get rid of, destroy the old if we're going to embrace the new. As Joseph Campbell has said, we often consider one person's religion a myth to be dismissed. But, we don't often look at the absurdity of our own, Okay, do we really believe that God spit on the earth, creating Adam out of dirt and saliva? Do we believe that Eve came from Adam's rib? And do we really believe that she got us all in trouble by talking to a snake and conning her husband into eating an apple? Yet that is our creation story. Is it any sillier than Vishnu opening his eyes to create a new universe, or Shiva dancing a new world into existence? When we take a bit of time to understand the religious aspects of another culture, we are adding to our own wisdom. Because all religions are trying to explain the unexplainable. And so we have to go to story, to symbols, to ideas that if you reify them, make no sense whatsoever. But if you see them as an epic mythology, then they begin to all make sense. Indian spirituality can be traced back as far as 3000 before Common Era, with some estimations to be much older. The Vedas and the Upanishads, the oldest written literature that we have, emphasizes meditation and introspection. Eknath S. Warren, whose translation and commentary on the major Indian wisdom literature, he says, this was Brahma Vidwa. This is what it's called, the supreme science. Supreme because where other sciences studied the external world, Brahma Vidwa sought knowledge of an underlying reality which would inform all other studies and activities. With this introspective tool, the inspired rishis, which literally means seers, of ancient India analyzed their awareness of human experience to see if there was anything in it that was absolute. And their findings can be summarized in 3 statements, which Aldous Huxley has called the perennial philosophy, because they appear in every age and civilization. Number 1, there is an infinite, changeless reality beneath the world of change. This same reality lies at the core of every human personality. The purpose of life is to discover this reality experientially, that is, to realize God while we are here on earth. Sound familiar? This is teaching is at least 5,000 years old, and we call it New Thought. The Bhagavad Gita was written somewhere between 400 before Common Era and 200 Common Era, and like the Vedas and the Upanishads, the authorship is pretty unclear. Nobody knows who really wrote it. And it's nestled within a much larger text called the Mahabharata. It's the story of the god Krishna, disguised as a charioteer for the soldier Arjuna. As they prepare for battle, Krishna begins to teach Arjuna about the greater truth than the one in which he is engaged. The entire story, as it plays out on the battlefield, is actually about the war within us, the struggle for self-mastery and self-realization. It is an instruction guide containing both ethics and metaphysics for the serious seeker on his or her path to enlightenment. The name Arjuna means one who makes sincere efforts, and the name Krishna means center of consciousness. So we can see by those names that this battle is really about our sincere attempts to spiritual understanding, which ultimately brings us to the infinite wisdom that flows from our own center of consciousness. This is what our study is all about, who we are, how we can bring this expression, this God stuff, to earth. So the plot of Gita is based on 2 sets of cousins competing for the throne. Diplomacy has failed, so the armies of these opposing clans meet on the battlefield to determine the fate of their kingdom. Arjuna, a proficient archer and warrior, has prepared for this battle. But the realization that he will be killing his family members and former teachers begins to weigh very heavily on him. At the end of the first chapter, Arjuna has put down his bow and arrow and is about to leave his chariot and walk off the battlefield. From chapter 2 to the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's task is to rouse Arjuna from his despair and reveal to him the way to enlightenment. And Arjuna, who's always been a man of action and not necessarily interested in his spiritual growth, questions what effect such wisdom has for everyday life. So in chapter 2, Krishna gives Arjuna an overview of this ancient perennial philosophy, beginning by reminding Arjuna of his immortal nature. His real self, the Atman, never dies because it was never born. It is eternal. And that's the same understanding when Dr. Ernest Holmes writes, the life within you, being God, did not begin and it cannot end. Hence you are immortal and eternal. Krishna introduces the idea of detachment, that by letting go of the attachment to pain and suffering, Arjuna can transcend the world of the ego and find his true self. He tells Arjuna that if he can establish himself in unshakable equanimity, profound peace of mind through meditation, he will be more effective in the realm of action. In Science of Mind, we call this treat and move your feet. Pray first, then act. And he tells Arjuna that his judgment will be better and his vision clearer if he is not emotionally entangled in the outcome of what he does. And the way to transcend that is through meditation, spiritual practices. And that's the idea of our own basic teaching. At the end of chapter 2, Arjuna, a man of action rather than spiritual acumen, is somewhat overwhelmed. His teacher has been talking about spiritual wisdom, direct experiential knowledge of the immortal self. So he asks the question that most of us have asked at some point on our spiritual path. What difference does this kind of wisdom make in everyday life? How does an awareness of our divinity affect the way we live? And how do we incorporate a spiritual life into a very human world? And I think, like Arjuna, many of us, as we began our spiritual path, we weren't interested in changing our beliefs. We just wanted to change the outward experience. And like Arjuna, we had to come to terms that it is the belief, and only the belief, that will change the exterior experiences. Eknath S. Warren says that Krishna's answer at the end of this chapter is one of the most quoted passages in the Gita. Mahatma Gandhi said that these verses contain the essence of the Gita, and that if the rest of the scripture were lost, this passage alone would be enough to teach a complete way of life. Quote, "Those who are established in spiritual wisdom live in continuous, unbroken awareness that they are not perishable body, but the Atman. Further, they see the same self in everyone, for the Atman is universally present in all. Such a one," Krishna says, "does not identify with personal desires. These desires are on the surface of personality, and the self is at its very core. The self-realized man or woman is not motivated by personal desire. In other words, by any desire for personal satisfaction." And the balance of the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna guiding Arjuna through those 4 paths to enlightenment. Jnana Yoga is the first path. These are 4 different paths that you can find enlightenment. Jnana Yoga. And this is a path of study and contemplation. And the more we study, the more we find that we are more in tune to our intuition. And so we are able to make choices from that place of wisdom that's beyond our everyday intellect. And the second path is that of Karma Yoga, and that's called the path of action. And that's really what Arjuna's path is all about, because he is a trained warrior. But Krishna tells Arjuna, "Let not the fruits of action be thy motive, nor let thy attachment be to inaction. Perform work in this world, Arjuna, as a man established within himself without selfish attachments and alike in success and defeat. For yoga is perfect evenness of mind. Third path, Sannyasa Yoga. And here the seeker realizes that it's not the actions, but the attachment to the results of actions, which is responsible for our bondage. Because attachments keep us in the ego. And we're attached to a result, and if that result is not forthcoming, then we are angry, we're disappointed, we're tempted to blame somebody else. We're thrown off our center. So these three paths, Jnana Yoga, the path of wisdom, Karma Yoga, the path of action, Sannyasa Yoga, the path of detachment, are like tributaries that flow into a river that flows into the sea. So these three paths flow into the river of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. And from there they run into the sea of enlightenment. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't use the term Bhakti Yoga, but the entire book is about moving one's life into a place where devotion to God, to that which is sacred, to one's own sacredness, as well as a wish to truly experience the oneness of everything, becomes uppermost in the mind of the seeker. And in fact, that person can no longer be called a seeker because he or she is so much a part of the one that there's nothing left to look for. And we find this supreme devotion in the mystics of every culture. From Mathilde of Magdeburg, the day of my spiritual awakening was the day I saw and knew that I saw all things in God and God in all things. Ramakrishna, it was suddenly revealed to me that everything is pure spirit. The utensils of worship, the altar, the door frames, all pure spirit, men, animals, other beings, all pure spirits. Then, like a madman, I began to shower flowers in all directions. Whatever I saw, I worshipped. And from the ancient Upanishads, long and narrow is the ancient path. I have touched it. I have found it. The path by which the wise knowers of the eternal, attaining to salvation, depart hence to the high world of paradise. From Rumi, if you find me not within you, you will never find me, for I have been with you from the beginning of me. Isn't that sweet? And from our own Ernest Holmes, there is a light and life at the center of all things and a consciousness that responds. This imprisoned splendor to the eyes that perceive it bursts like the glory of new dawn. This incarnated consciousness and intelligence in all things can communicate itself to us and speak a divine language to the one who listens. You and I will not physically celebrate Diwali this week. We won't set off fireworks to bring Lakshmi to our house. But perhaps we can incorporate this image of Lakshmi as a reminder of our own abundance, not just wealth, but an abundance of compassion, abundance of forgiveness, abundance of love, abundance of creativity. And we may not believe that Shiva creates the world by dancing it into existence. But when we see a dust devil twirling across a field, or squirrels frolicking around a tree, isn't there a hint of Shiva at play? The Hindus believe that because everything is one, everything is to be honored. And isn't that our teaching as well? Ernest Holmes says, everything that lives proclaims the glory of God. Every person who exists manifests the life of God. There is one spirit in which we live, one mind by which we think, one body of which we are a part, and one light that lights every person's pathway. So you and I have everything we need to live our lives to the fullest. And sometimes it takes a little help from our friends, from our families, and sometimes from other cultures to discover that inner light and shine it out to the world. So today, because the language of God is Brahman, I'd like to close with a Hindu prayer. Oh God, lead us from the unreal to the real. Oh God, lead us from darkness to light. O God, lead us from death to immortality. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace unto all. O Lord God Almighty, may there be peace in celestial regions. May there be peace on earth. May the waters be appeasing. May herbs be wholesome, and may trees and plants bring peace to all. May all beneficent beings bring peace to us. May the Vedic law propagate peace all through the world. May all things be a source of peace to us. And may thy peace itself bestow peace on all. And may that peace come to me also. Namaste.